And there's the Congressman. How are you, Congressman Kennedy?
I'm good. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Well, we can get going because I know there's a lot of questions. Just want to say good afternoon to you. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hope you and your family are staying well, and everybody else that's on the call is staying healthy. I do want to thank Eli Spilu. Is it Spiu? I knew I was going to mess that one up, from the Small Business Administration. And thank you so much for being available for our call. Thank you both. I do want to make a couple of housekeeping. I just mention a couple of things. If everyone can make sure that they're on mute until it's time to ask your question, that'd be great. And if you do have a question, just use the raise your hand button that's on the bottom. I think it's down on the right, and we'll do our best to get as many questions in as we can, if that's okay. We are recording the meeting, and we'll send the link to everybody that registered online, and we'll also put it up on our website. So before we get started, I do want to say thank you. Just take a minute and say thanks to our sponsors for today's meeting, and if they could introduce themselves. So Derek, you there?
I am, Laura. Thank you. My name is Derek Furloughed. I'm a senior vice president with Charles River Bank. I'm in charge of commercial lending here at the bank. And thank you, Congressman Kennedy, for being available to us today and providing some modicum of normalcy to our day. And like Laura said, it's really nice to see everybody's faces again. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Derek. Alicia, you there?
I think she's having some difficulty, Laura.
All right. How about Jamie? Is Jamie on? Jamie Doucette? No. How about Kevin Goff? Is Kevin here from Dean Bank? No. Well, anyway, our four sponsors were Charles River Bank, Homefield Credit Union, Doucette and Doucette CPA, and Dean Bank. Thank you so much. We have a lot of anxious business owners on the call today, needless to say. So, and you know, the number one question is going to be, when can we reopen? So, how about we get started? Could you give us any updates on what the federal government is doing right now in response to the pandemic?
Yeah. So first off, Laura, just thank you for having me. Thanks for pulling all of this together. Grateful for the opportunity, and really grateful to our partners here at SBA to be on as well and answer some of the technical questions. We're getting a lot of them, and deservedly so, reasonably so. Folks that are wondering exactly how it is that they can go about ensuring that they are able to gain access to the funds that have been made available that Congress has appropriated, and understanding there's been some challenges in doing so, to put it mildly, for some of the folks out there. So a couple of things. Congress, I think as everybody knows, not to go back through all of this, but has now passed a series of different responses to the virus that have focused on both our economy and the impact on public health. The latest versions of it have been, the last round that we passed a week ago was focused on small businesses, on our assistance to hospitals, and then scaling up testing. When it comes to small businesses, just to focus on that, because I think that's going to be the main focus of the conversation here. Congress has appropriated about $670 billion in support for small businesses, the vast majority of which has come through that Paycheck Protection Program, which is providing critical support. The challenge with it is a couple-fold. One, it's not enough money. It's a lot of money in and of itself, but it's not enough. And in fact, plenty of business leaders and experts and folks out there have at least suggested to me that the overall number that is expected that Congress should be targeting is more along the lines of $8 trillion. And that shortfall now coming in tranches of $350 billion, about another $300 billion, $40 billion or so. Coming that way just means that after every appropriation, there's business owners that are left hanging. And after this round, they'll be left hanging for now a number of weeks that will bleed into well over a month. That is far too long to expect a small business to be able to stay afloat, paying their employees, and be able to weather this storm. And so I've been trying to push Congress to actually get that number much higher, to provide much more aggressive assistance through a number of different channels. One, direct cash payments, and then two, plush up the money here for small businesses. If this program is going to work the way we designed it to work, which is to provide small businesses with the liquidity to be able to keep employees on their payroll, you can't do that 8 weeks after you shut down the entire economy, expect businesses to still somehow be able to operate. So what I continue to push on leadership in both the House and Senate to move more money here and to move aggressively in order to provide some of the assistance. There's the additional then challenges of not just Congress's part on this, but SBA and EDU has been, and they've been wonderful partners and getting on a number of these calls and conferences with me. And I know a number of others as well. I'll let them go through some of the statistics in terms of the number of loans and programs that they've been able to, initiatives they've authorized over the course of the past several weeks in comparison to their historical average. It's a pretty stunning comparison. But, you know, the challenges there when you're trying to get this amount of money out into a community this quickly means there's going to be backlogs, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be errors just because the volume is so high. And that has a very real consequence when it comes to the viability of people's businesses and the financial needs of individuals and families. And so I know everybody's trying to work through that as best we can. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be mistakes. It doesn't mean that people don't have a right to get frustrated. We're trying to work through that, and we'll keep pushing. I do expect that there's going to be another round of assistance. The state, some of these positions are being already drawn into line or drawn pretty firmly. With regards to first, additional assistance to state and local governments, their budgets are, as you can imagine, for many states about to be devastated. There's significant shortfalls projected in Massachusetts by the end of our fiscal year, which ends June 30th, to say nothing of the next fiscal year, which by some estimates, you've got states that are looking at budget shortfalls by over 30%, which is going to be devastating. So additional support there. We're seeing some pushback from Republicans on what's going to be necessary in order to, or what, how much of that aid they're willing to provide, and what, oddly enough, bargaining what they should get in order for providing aid to cities and towns and states, which we can get into that if people want. But that's kind of the context of where things are now. Please keep in touch with our office. We've got 2 dedicated staff members from our office back in Massachusetts that are just helping businesses in our district navigate through this process. Reach on out, and we're happy to help and do whatever we can. And Laura, I'll kick it back to you.
All right. Before we let people ask their questions, you know, I know Governor Baker launched the Reopening Advisory Board. Is May 18th the date where they are going to tell everybody, you know, when all the different businesses can reopen, or what's the phasing? How are they going to work that?
I think so with regards to the governor, I'm not sure they've fully figured out exactly what they're going to do. They've pulled together an advisory board, 17 members on the business side. I think there's other individuals that they need to pull into that as well. My understanding from speaking with some of the governor's folks is that I announced that the business side of that, obviously there needs to be a discussion with public health officials, with some of the federal officials to understand exactly the timeline and assistance that's going to come from the federal government. And then I think additional stakeholders in our community that were left out of that first piece that need to be represented there too, in order to make sure that this is as seamless as it needs to be. I do think that the science, the reopening schedule here has to account for the science. And I was on with the governor, I think yesterday or the day before, and you know, we have plateaued more or less in the number of cases, largely the number of cases and in number of fatalities, but we're not decreasing yet. 2 days ago was the highest number of fatalities we've had yet. And so all of these efforts are making a difference. We have not seen our hospital system overrun, but there are plenty of hospitals at this point that are operating with over 100% capacity in their ICUs. So for those of us that have been on the front lines of these discussions, talking with hospital administrators, and I think there's at least one that's joined us today on the forum, but You know, the margin here is still very, very slim. They've been able to make sure that they don't get overrun, but it ain't by much. And I think we got to be careful to make sure that we don't, by opening up too quickly, you don't end up creating a second wave of this that is potentially worse than the first.
Yeah. Well, how about we open it up to questions, because I know there's a lot of people there looking to ask you a few questions, and we'll see where we can go from there. I'm sure Eli's going to get a lot of questions, so hang in there, buddy.
Alicia has her hand up.
Alicia, okay, so Alicia from Homefield Credit Union, thank you for sponsoring our event today. And you have a question for the Congressman? Here is. No, I think she's having a struggle being able for us to hear her. Does anybody else have their hand up, Sherry?
That's all I see right now.
No. All right. Well, I know Kevin Goff is on the call. He's with Dean Bank. Are you there, Kevin?
And Laura, I think the SBA, Eli has some slides he wanted to show as well. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we can go to that if you'd like, Eli. You hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Well, Laura, I first and foremost, I want to thank you for putting this event together. You know, definitely, it takes a lot of work, and I want to thank the Congressman. You know, this is probably the third event that I'm on one of the town halls that you're part of as well, Congressman. And definitely, you know, very appreciative of your leadership and the work you have done in Congress to make this funding available, you know, for the small businesses here in the state and throughout the nation. I do have some numbers that I do want to share with everybody, and I think the best way I could do it is through this presentation. Obviously, my camera is not working for the folks who are listening to us, so I decided I'll put a picture of mine here on the next slide. And just a little bit about me. I'm a 20-year veteran in the lending industry. And, you know, this is by far the busiest time in my 20-year, you know, career. So as you will see with some of the numbers I'm about to share, on phase one of this Paycheck Protection Loan Program, we funded more loans in 14 days than we have done nationally, on a national level at the SBA for the previous 14 years combined. Okay, so that's just phenomenal. And my hat's off to the lenders here in the state. You know, we are so grateful to all of them for rising to the occasion. You know, I want to thank the four sponsoring lenders here for the event today. Definitely, you know, I know that they have been burning the midnight, you know, oil and working, you know, overtime, making sure that Massachusetts small businesses do get their fair share of this program that Congress made available to us. So a quick report by the numbers, you know, in case you cannot tell, I get excited when I talk about numbers, but this is for the first round of funding. Some of you may have seen these numbers because this is data as of April 16th. And you can see here, over 1.6 million small businesses nationally got funding through the previous round of funding for the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. So that's, you know, over $342 billion. And as I said, it exceeds the number, you know, of loans and dollars we put out in the previous 14 years combined. But you can see here some regional statistics as well. Massachusetts leading the pack. You know, in New England, almost 47,000 small businesses basically got funding through the, you know, the first round of the PPP program. It accounted for half of all the dollars, close to half of all the dollars in the New England region. So again, we had about 458 lenders participating in the program, the first round of funding, and truly very appreciative. We're grateful for everything our lending community has done. But I do have some additional information that I do want to share. So in here, you can see again, the average loan size for the first round of funding. we're looking at small dollars. $206,000 is the average loan size. And if you look at the breakdown of the loans, for the most part, over 1.2 million loans were for $150,000 or less. So about 74% of all, the units went to small businesses, the smaller businesses, I should say. And if you're really looking, and I know that we are all hear what's on the national media, loans over $5 million only accounted, for 9% of the dollars. But as far as units, is a very small percentage. So for the most part, loans up to, $350,000 make up the majority of the units for the first round of funding. Now, I do have a quick update here. This is a little dated because the latest we've got on a national level is as of Wednesday, the 29th. But this is some good news and truly, remarkable activity for the second, phase of funding through the PPP program. If you see here, close to 1 million loans, $90 billion in approvals, and our lender count went up by 400 new lenders into the program. But this is, at the bottom of the slide here, you can see that this is no surprise to many of the small businesses out there. The smaller banks, those with under $10 billion in assets, they truly led the way. And whether it's dollars, about 61% of the loan volume so far has been done by those smaller banks. So definitely kudos to you all, and definitely appreciate it. In-state based lenders here in Massachusetts, we've got about 159 small banks and credit unions that are truly trying their hardest. And what we've heard in speaking with lenders, most of them have cleared their pipeline. So there is definitely funding still left in the program, and for the most part, some of the local banks, they're all done entering loans into the system, so they have all secured funding for their small business clients. Now, medium banks, on the other hand, about 206,000 units for over $20 billion was done, by banks between 10 to $50 billion in assets. And the larger banks, if you look at it by the numbers, they did about 167,000 units, for over $25 billion. So just to share with everybody, and I know we've got lenders on the line as well, our burn rate on the first round of funding was about $2 billion an hour. And this second round of funding, I cannot say that it started off without any issues. Monday was actually the first day we started taking applications. It was a terrible day for our system. We figured out what the issue was, and the very next day, we stopped accepting the applications from robots, which was really draining our system, slowing it down. So starting on Tuesday, everything, got back to normal. And currently our burn rate is about slightly over $2 billion an hour. So there's still funding in the program, which is the good news. We're asking, small businesses that if they have not either heard from their primary lender or do not have an update on their application, it doesn't hurt to hedge your bets, and to have a second application in place. The rules of the game are such that you can only have one loan, one paycheck protection loan in the system. However, the first loan that makes it into the system, into our system that is going to kick out all other loans that are going to be submitted after the fact. So you're not going to be in violation with the program rules, because our system is going to make sure that only one loan is going to be submitted. And again, just a word of advice, with everyone, if you're in that situation where you missed out on the first round of funding, you haven't heard from your lender, you're not sure if you have a loan or not, it doesn't hurt to submit another application with a lender who is all done with their existing pipeline, and they're taking applications from the general public. So that's what I wanted to share with everybody, and definitely, if any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thanks, Eli. A lot of our members had reached out to me to say that they had applied for the EIDL back in March when it became available, and they haven't been approved yet. So what's the average time that it's taken for that one?
So as probably most of you already know, we no longer have any funding available for new EIDL loan applications. But all the applications that we have accepted, the SBA is working on those, and there's definitely they're being processed in a first come first served basis. So we're currently at a 4 to 6 week turnaround time. The agency, for everybody, just so you all know it, the agency hired 7,000 new agents. Okay, and they're not all of them are fully trained. So I have heard from small business owners when they call the Office of Disaster Assistance Customer Service Center, at 800-659-2955. Some of those agents are actually not able to, to answer their questions. They cannot see, the loan status on the system. So we're telling folks to basically ask for a tier 2 specialist. When you call the Office of Disaster Assistance, a tier 2 specialist is an actual SBA loan specialist working on these files and not a customer service rep. So that's the best advice I can share with folks. You call the Office of Disaster Assistance, 800-659-2955. If the rep on the phone cannot answer a question about the loan status, definitely ask for a tier 2 specialist, and they should be able to pull up the loan application. We are seeing applications approved on a daily basis, but at a far slower pace than what the PPP has been.
Yeah. So I do have to say that I did make a phone call last week ourselves because we had applied for that one. And when I got on the call, it said I was in line. I was number 672 in line. So I was like, oh, good Lord. But I have to tell you, I wasn't even waiting 5 minutes for someone to get on the phone. So there's definitely a lot of people there picking up the calls. So I appreciate that. I know, is Kevin available to ask his question? I know some people are having a problem being heard. Is Kevin Goff available? No. How about Mike Carroll?
Laura,
If I can ask, if people are having trouble answering or asking their question being heard, you can ask it from the chat. We can get to it that way.
Yeah.
There are some in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead, Mike. Thank you for sponsoring.
Yeah, Laura, first of all, we absolutely, it's our pleasure. We are delighted to be able to have such an innovative, method of getting together. This has been, life-changing for us on a personal basis, but also from a business perspective. So it's amazing to see how we've been able to adapt as quickly as a community. And Congressman Kennedy, thank you so much for making the time. I know you're very busy. We really, really appreciate it. So our CEO, Kevin Goff, had a few questions, and most of them have been answered already through the presentation. Congressman, one of the questions Kevin had is regarding some temporary changes that have been made to banking regulations, specifically Reg D. They've suspended the 6 per month limit on transfers and withdrawals from savings and money market accounts. He was wondering, what could be done in the weeks or months ahead to keep in place those changes that are going to be now necessary in our permanently changed society? So
it's a great question, Mike, and it's the first time I've gotten that example of one of the things that potentially one of those changes that should be made permanent. So love to learn a little bit more about it, and happy to discuss after this either with you or your team kind of the implications of that and why. I think a couple of kind of broad points here though. One, and I think most people agree with this, is as much as all of us want to go back to normal as quickly as we can, I think most also recognize that normal has to be different, because if we go back just to the way we were, all that means is that we have a community that is still in a society that ends up being as vulnerable to this type of disruption And we know something like this is going to happen again, right? In the past 8 or 10 years, we've had SARS, we've had MERS, you've had H1N1, H5N1, you've had Ebola. There's a lot of reasons why this one's different. We can get into that if people want, but regardless, the issue isn't, is there going to be another threat? Is the threat of a pandemic over after this one? It's how do we prepare society to live with that threat and have our defenses basically operational so that you decrease the disruption when something like this does happen and we're not forced to go through this again. I don't think anybody feels like we can go through this again. So I think there's a lot of questions there around healthcare. There's some questions there around the economy. There's some questions there around some structural issues around like things like paid leave and accessible childcare. But I have no doubt that there's also aspects of this in the financial system, in the banking system, that are going to empower individuals, empower small businesses to just make sure that there's some things here. Look, one of my areas of focus has been mental health. We've been pushing for reforms for telehealth now for years. We've made more reforms around telehealth in the past month than we probably had in the previous decade, right? Just because the necessity means you got to change it, and then people figure out, hey, there's actually some benefits here. So happy to discuss offline with you about kind of the technicalities and the details of the regulation that you speak about, and some of the I think groundwork that can be laid to say, hey, as things are going to revert at some point back to where they were before, there's some things that really shouldn't. So let's learn this lesson and show how it's made our country more resilient and stronger going forward.
Awesome. I know Toby Kelly is on. She has a question. If we received our $10,000 advance, does that mean we will get approved for the EIDL loan? That's probably for Eli.
Alrighty, so that's a very good question. So the under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the first $10,000, if the individual is approved for that large of an advance, will be converted into a forgivable grant. So the way it's working is $1,000 per employee. So most people, those who have applied, using the newer application process, which started on March 29th, the first week of those applications have, people are already getting their advances. So it's $1,000 per employee as people, enter the number of employees on the application, the streamlined process that is. I know hundreds of people have already received that advance, and that is step one of many. So once people get truly to just go over the process, the first thing that you're going to notice, if you have one of those credit monitoring systems in place on your credit report, you're going to get a notification saying SBA pull your credit. 2 or 3 business days later, you're going to see the advance in your bank account. Okay, about 7 to 10 days after you see the advance in your bank account, you will receive a notification from the SBA saying you've been approved for X, Y, and Z. And then you create, your own, username and password on a portal. You accept that, and then go from there with the documentation. But the advance, even for people who will be denied the loan under the EIDL program, the advance is permanent. They get to keep the money. That converts into a forgivable grant.
Do we have to keep track on what say if you have 5 employees and you get $5,000, do you have to keep track of where you're spending that money? Do you need to show proof?
So the only time when that becomes important is if you're applying also for a Paycheck Protection Loan Program. So people need to understand that this CARES Act does not allow for both programs, both grant programs to be available to the same business. So you can either have a forgivable loan, or a forgivable grant. You cannot have both. Usually the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, the loan forgiveness, is the larger amount of the two. Therefore, the forgivable grant under the EIDL loan needs to be included into the forgiven loan amount. So let me just give a quick example. So say 8 weeks of payroll expenses for a small business add up to $100,000. Okay, They also got $10,000 advance under the EIDL program. The forgiven loan amount is going to end up being the 100,000, right, minus the 10. So only $90,000 of that original loan amount is going to be forgiven, because 10,000 of it is already forgiven as a grant under the EIDL loan.
All right. That's good to know. I hope that answered your question, Toby. Shafali, are you on?
Hi, Laura.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. You have a question for Eli?
Yeah, I do. Hi, Eli. How are you? This is Shafali from Rockland.
Hi, Shafali. Good to hear your voice.
Thank you for being here, and thank you to Congressman Joe Kennedy for spending your valuable time with us. Quick question for Eli. So I do have a lot of questions coming up from self-employed and 1099 subcontractors, and they are asking what type of documentations SBA will require to validate the PPP proceeds that they will be using. I can understand with the other businesses like payroll summary that it's obviously they can provide us those documents, but for self-employed Schedule C and 1099, any thoughts of or advice that we can communicate with our business owners?
Well, Shafali, I think this is a little too technical of a question, but I'll briefly, give you an answer. So obviously, for those businesses that do have a payroll processing service, that's easy. Like you said, the 941 would do the trick,
Right.
A payroll processing document. A sole proprietor, independent contractor that only has one employee, or they're the sole employee of the business. Obviously, as you know, the calculation was based off of their net income for 2019. So, they need to keep track of their payroll by writing a check to themselves. We are advising people to open if they don't have a payroll account, it's free to open a checking account at any bank nowadays, a business checking account. Open a payroll account, deposit the funds, segregate those funds, make sure you write a check on a weekly or biweekly basis to yourself. If you're, self-employed, don't have a payroll service in place, show the paper trail, document the use of proceeds as best you can. So that our program, is common sense program. We're here to help people. We're not here looking, for a gotcha moment. You didn't show us X, Y, and Z. So, that's, as documenting the file is the best, advice I can give.
Perfect. Thank you. That's what we are recommending, to open separate account to track the proceeds. So thank you.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Shafali. Is Kate Warsing on? Kate? No. All right. One of the other ones that I've been hearing, a little bit of grumbling about is, with the furloughed workers and not wanting to return to their jobs because they're earning more money now on unemployment, that extra $600 till July. Is there a reporting tool on the state website for employers to use, or how is that going to work? Congressman Kennedy, maybe you can answer that one.
Is there a reporting tool for what?
Right. So if somebody got their PPP and they're ready to get their employees back to work, and get them off unemployment, and now the employees are saying, well, you know what, I don't want to come back to work. I'm making too much money on unemployment, more than I was making when I was working. What's the process there?
I don't think.
Do the employers report to the state that they offered their job back?
I'm unaware of any program there to report employees
No.
employers that want to come back to work that have decided not to. Obviously, there's while there might be instances of that, those employees also have to balance the additional support they're getting from this recovery program to say that if you turn down your job now, it's not a guarantee, obviously, that the job is going to be offered to you would come August 1st when that additional support dries up. And every economic forecast I've looked at calls for unemployment rates well above 10% for the next 18 months minimum. So I think, the idea here that this recovery, unfortunately, is going to look somewhat, as I said, like a V or a U. Most of the economic forecasts I've seen, don't bear that reality out. We've seen a massive drop in consumer spending, the highest drop on record. We've seen, I think, at best a phased reopening, given the timeline here from what we're seeing, at least on the healthcare side of things, until a vaccine, until medication that is proven to be effective at mitigating the worst impacts of the virus is widely available. And that's still, even in the best case scenario, months away. And that's just that medication where we are seeing some advance. That medication doesn't mean you don't get the disease. That just might mean you don't get as sick for as long, at least from some of the ones that have been released publicly so far. And a vaccine is still, best case scenario, best case, months away. And in all likelihood, more like a year away. So if that's the reality, I think, you all run businesses for a living. But, if you're a restaurant and you're okay to open up, but you're forced to operate at a quarter of that capacity, or maybe a third or 50% capacity. If you're a small business, even in retail, and you can only have half the number of patrons you would normally have in your stores at a time, I think you're going to see a long and deep recovery here, because you still got stores that need to make rent, and so that there's going to be a challenge here, I think, for a little while, and for a while yet. And that means Congress is going to have to continue to be supportive, but it also means that for some of those employees, well, yes, getting an additional bump in that paycheck or in that unemployment benefits would be beneficial now and help. I think some of those folks need a critical need now. If you have an employer that's offering you your job back, you have to balance that additional support for the next, couple months, which is not insignificant or insubstantial, but off the fact that you're going to be looking at an elevated unemployment rate for a long time to come. So those jobs are going to be at a premium.
Yeah. Let's see, we have any other questions? Ed, would you like to give us an update on what's happening at the hospital, or do you have a question?
I would. Thank you, Laura, for the opportunity. I wanted to listen in today, and I had two thank yous. First is to the Congressman. I don't know how he does it, because he's touched base with me a number of times in terms of issues at the hospital, our supplies, our testing, and the economics of what it means to us, which is devastating. But we are putting patients first, and again, I appreciate his interest in always making sure that the community comes first in terms of healthcare. So thank you, Congressman. The other thank you I wanted to put out is to the community. I think nationally, we've never had an issue like this where there's so much demand on supplies throughout the country, and so supplies have been short. You've read and heard, you probably heard a lot about PPE, or protective equipment for our staff, and honestly, it's been a struggle for all hospitals to get through this. We feel fortunate in terms of the donations that we've gotten from the community, all kinds of different supplies, and particularly supplies we've gotten like ponchos and certain plastic material that have come in. And actually, we've had volunteers at the hospital making PPE for our staff. So again, we're trying to take care of the community. We're trying to protect our staff, and again, it's because of the community that we've been able to keep our head above water. Just a comment. Basically, the Congressman hit it right on par. Our hospital on the inpatient side is really right at capacity. So fortunately, when we built our new building, we had a little bit of an overflow ICU for the future, but we're really right at capacity. We didn't know what to expect. Our emergency department, like a lot of emergency departments, has not seen a big uptick, but it's the sicker patients, and knock on wood, right now we're basically right at capacity, but holding our own. So again, a thank you to the congressman and a thank you to the community.
Thanks,
Thank
Ed.
you, my friend. Really grateful.
All right, we have another question here. Will there be any relief on our employer unemployment rate, as we are getting many unemployment claims from our furloughed employees?
For me?
Yes, please.
So any break on
Will there be any relief on our employer unemployment rate, as we are getting many unemployment claims from our furloughed employees?
That's the first question on that one I've gotten. I can double check on that, but I think if the furloughed, so I'll have to get back to you. I can circle back with you, and whoever asked the question can follow up with our office, and we'll make sure we get an answer.
This is Laura. Can I speak? It's Toby.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the point of that question is, it's my understanding, as we get hit with more unemployment claims, then our tax rate goes up next year. Like it's gonna be looked back at, and based on the fact that I had 20 or 25 unemployment claims against me due to my shutdown, my employer tax rate on unemployment is going to go up. Some states have put in legislation that says that is not going to increase. We're not going to get dinged by that. Michigan is one example of a state that said our unemployment tax rate is not going to go up because of these claims. That's the gist of the question.
Got it. So thank you. I appreciate the background. So let me talk with some of our colleagues in the State House about that. I'm not sure. I was going to say I was unaware of the federal implication on that. So thank you for the clarification. Let me talk to some of the folks in the state about it. I'm certain that obviously all of the state reps and state senators are trying to navigate through this, what the appropriate state response is going to be, and that would certainly seem like it would make sense. I mentioned earlier the impact on state budgets. The estimate that I've seen so far from Massachusetts for this fiscal year ending June 30th is about roughly 10, 12, 14%, depending on the estimate that you look at, which is roughly $4 to $5 billion shortfall. For next year, it's estimated to be about 25% so far, out of a $42 billion budget. And remember, 40% of that's Medicaid. So when you take 40% of the budget and put that on healthcare, right, which in a time of a pandemic is probably still going to be needed and necessary, that other 25% starts to be a very big hit out of everything else: education, first responders, transportation, infrastructure, everything else. And taking it out of healthcare in the midst of a pandemic is a tough thing to do too. So that's where the federal response for assistance to states and municipalities is going to be so unbelievably important, because we have to fill some of that. States can't, they're not going to be able to make this work. And I think part of that question ends up being, the extent to which the federal government's able to create that backstop to provide, again, and hopefully if some of this assistance is early and aggressive and we streamline some of these processes so that money can get out, hopefully that you don't run into the circumstance that you're talking about. But let me, I appreciate the clarification there. Let me take that one back and try to get an answer for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Kate Warsing, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You want to ask your question?
Oh, yes, please. I'd like to ask Congressman, are lawmakers looking to include provisions relating to climate as they consider funding future program phases?
So I think lawmakers are looking to do an awful lot of things on this. And I do think that there's I've been pushing for some reforms around climate to try to get various pieces in there. There's been much of the focus, at least so far, has been on the immediate triage. I think there's going to be a very robust and probably a hotly debated series of packages going forward that are going to be difficult politically on a number of levels. So one, you're going to have folks like me that are going to say, hey, if we're going to go do something on infrastructure, let's make sure it's climate-oriented infrastructure. You're You probably saw, I think it was either today or yesterday, piece in the Boston Globe, when there's far more attention now, obviously, to the disparate impact that this virus is having on communities of color. Most of those communities overlap pretty darn well with environmental justice communities. It's been a big focus of mine before this crisis and certainly through it. Communities like Chelsea, communities like Springfield, but a lot of other communities around the country that have, being in environmental justice communities, have a much greater incidence of air pollution, that have a higher incidence of respiratory infection and respiratory challenges, that now you overlay COVID-19 on top of it, and it's been, the health impact has been devastating. You want to address that, obviously COVID-19, yes, but you then also have to address the environmental degradation that's causing those underlying respiratory ailments as well. You lay on top of that oil prices that are literally, I think as of, a couple of days ago, oil contracts were negative. About 10 days ago, when I filled up a car the other day, it was $1.45, which probably hadn't been like that since I was in college, like my freshman or sophomore year. It was $20 to fill up the car. It was crazy. And much of that, the underlying aspects, the underlying reasons why, I don't think are going to be alleviated anytime soon. So you're going to see this kind of oversupply of oil, more so than gas, but oil on our markets. That is going to lead to severe economic impacts through large parts of our country. That is unrelated, to some extent unrelated to the COVID-19, but related in that to the extent that much of that price is going to be demand driven. When you see the drastic decrease in air travel, the drastic decrease in car travel, global demand, oil is a demand influenced commodity. That demand literally falling off a cliff means those prices fall through the floor, which means there's literally thousands of smaller oil companies and the various pieces to that chain that are going to go bankrupt, and hundreds of thousands of people that are going to be looking for jobs, largely through kind of the West to Midwest, right? Texas, Oklahoma, et cetera, which is going to be a major area of focus for I have to believe, for our Republican colleagues coming through these rescue packages to provide support to those companies, because they're red states, but they're also their constituents, they're their employees, they need help. And so you're going to have a line in the sand from Republicans saying you have to support oil and gas. You're going to have a line in the sand from us saying, hey, we've been pushing on climate for a long time, let's be aggressive about it. You're going to have to find something that is going to be able to make this part work. And we'll be pushing very hard to ensure that there's going to be a comprehensive and aggressive action made here to actually do something that is going to make sure that for our generation, my generation, this catastrophe is a harbinger of the one to come, which is climate related, and we better not let this opportunity slip from actually making meaningful progress on climate, and we haven't done in modern American history. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anybody else with a question out there? No? We all good? Well, I know Congressman Kennedy needs to get going. I know he's going on another call, but I want to say thank you so much, Congressman, for speaking with us. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. Thank you to our sponsors, Charles River Bank, Homefield Credit Union, Doucette CPA, and Dean Bank. And thanks, Eli. I appreciate your slides and letting us know more about the loans. And like Congressman Kennedy did say, he's got Lisa and he's got Dan. He's got a lot of great people working in his office. If you have any questions, they're great for getting back to everybody. So thank you for all your help. And thank you again for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
I hope everybody have a wonderful weekend.